Tinbergen was a good ethologist. He studied behavior, and he asked good questions about why these behaviors are adaptive, why they evolved, and what is actually behind them. So today, in this lecture, we're going to cover Tinbergen's questions and apply them to odd mating systems. So I want to apply sexual selection to some weird examples in the organismal world. Relate inclusive fitness, of course, to social behavior. Relate resource allocation to mating, and relate ecology to evolution. And of course, apply Tinbergen's questions to the mating systems as a good start for applying Tinbergen's questions to other ecological concepts. So of course, here's a bit of a basic overview from last time. Monogamy being one male, one female with pair bonds. Polygyny being one male, several females and pair bonds. Polyandry being several males, one female and pair bonds. Polygyandry being several males and several females. Remember, there are pair bonds. Pairs are two, so they're bonded 1 to 1, not 1 to 18 to 2 to 5 to... Promiscuity is, well, no pair bonds. Simply the lack thereof. And remember that mating systems are optimal. So what are the costs? There is a decreased fitness if one picks a suboptimal mating partner. There are resources that could be devoted to young that do not survive. That is a cost. Time and energy that is spent mating and procreating could be spent eating and growing. So the energy put into an egg could have been put into bones. Calcium in the eggshell could have been put into the calcium of a femur. There are more costs, of course. Remember that an animal, while mating, is susceptible to predation. So, while distracted, as it were, the cost of raising young. There are a lot of costs to this, but the benefit is fitness. And evolutionarily speaking, that's the only benefit that matters. No fitness, well, then your genes are gone, and we don't quite care for what you did in life. It doesn't matter. So fitness is the benefit, and the higher the fitness, then the better the organism is adapted to its environment. So sexual selection here is to choose a mate that'll give the best offspring for the least cost. So we're going to approach sexual selection questions via Tinbergen's questions. Tinbergen was an ethologist who sought to answer basically why things do what they do. And you can look at this along a couple of scales. The first being proximate. When talking to my kids about why they are upset, I ask, what are proximate and ultimate causes? Now, the ecologist will say, well, it's the ecological scale versus the evolutionary time. You may say it's within the organism versus within the lineage. You can also just think of it as okay, so what is the proximate and ultimate cause? What is the thing right now versus the big picture behind it? My son throws a screaming fit because he cannot get a certain toy. Well, the proximate cause is the toy is taken away from him. The ultimate scale is that he's very tired and hungry. So there is a bigger picture behind. So you can think of the ultimate scale maybe as the meta, the big, the gestalt, the everything behind it. But the proximate scale is what we can see very easily and measure within an organism's lifetime. One question we can ask is a mechanism question. So my favorite tree here on my property was destroyed recently. It was broken in twain by what I believe to be squirrels. Now, I think it may have been a squirrel falling from a tree. It's a more fun one to imagine, but I think it was actually just 4 squirrels that were, well, engaged in a bit of a mating ritual, as it were, and chasing each other around. One ran up a tree, and the tree was too small to support him, so he broke it. Been growing it for 4 years. Anyway, the squirrel is mating. Good. Okay, so the squirrel has a mating call. The mechanism of that mating call is going to be the various organs in the throat, the various movements movement of air from the lungs, and the neurobiology of the brain that allows the squirrel to make this mating call. You make that call, you attract all the other squirrels, you get in a big squirrel fight, you break my tree. The development of this is a squirrel kitten is not going to climb a tree and it's not going to do that. Only at a certain developmental stage will the squirrel have this whole mating call begin. So there is an approximate scale to this, the mechanism. How does a squirrel make their mating call? The development. When does a squirrel make their mating call? There's an ultimate scale. Oh, sorry. Let's get that development in there. Perhaps it is hormones that cause a squirrel to decide to mate. So it's the hormones that are, for example, these female squirrels have a very different kind of squeaking kind of mating call. The males have one, the females have the other. This is a question of development, how hormones cause these calls. We can look at the ultimate scale as well. So the adaptation, what is the advantage to a squirrel having a mating call? Well, the adaptation, the advantage is in a dense forest, visual recognition is not going to be key, but auditory recognition can be key. So an adaptation would be that the squirrel gives this mating call, and it can be heard over long distances, thus telling where his property is or his territory is, and that the squirrel therefore gains a fitness advantage by having a mating call. Squirrels that do not have the mating call do not have any fitness. They cannot get a territory, they cannot attract mates. That's the adaptation. And then descent. Squirrels are in a group that will also contain chipmunks, western squirrels, so western gray squirrels. I'm looking at eastern gray squirrels. And they also have groups the group will include groundhogs, prairie dogs, and further out different types of rodents. What we'll notice about the most related organisms is that they also have mating calls. So the descent is that at one point in this evolutionary pathway, there was the evolution of a squeaking rodent. And this squeaking rodent happened to give rise to all of these other squirrels. So that's a descent kind of question for this. Now we're asking, why do squirrels make this call? Or how do squirrels make this call? And we have mechanism, development, adaptation, and descent. And what is the end result of this call? Well, the end result of this call is that they're going to attract all the other squirrels to my neighborhood, get in a huge wrestling match, and destroy my favorite tree. Yeah. On a completely unrelated note, I purchased small game tips for my arrows. I enjoy archery, and I don't know if I can hit a squirrel just yet, but I suppose I should look up some recipes, just in case. Speaking of squirrels, this is what we'll be doing in class. We'll be asking, why do squirrels have a polygynous mating system? One male, several females. And this is just, we believe they, I'm just saying they do for the sake of argument. Get in 4 groups, or depending on the numbers, how many groups we have. I think we had 10 students enrolled and probably 8 showing up, so groups of 2 there. And each group is going to take one of the Tinbergen's questions, be it mechanism, development, adaptation, or descent. If you're doing this from home, I want you to answer all of them. Feel free to email me if you have questions. Does this count as a descent question for polygynous mating system? And consider it from an optimality perspective. Why is this the best for its resources? Take your time. I don't have to, because pause. So let's talk about some systems. This is really just applying questions and applying mating knowledge and sexual selection to different mating systems that really seem weird. So sexual selection can be applied to all mating systems. If it cannot, then we have a lot of other questions to start asking. Here's an example where we have a frog getting squeezed to death by her partner. So the female is on the bottom here, and the male, she's dead. The male is mounting her and releasing his sperm, because some female frog species will not release all of their eggs until they die. So how is that optimal? How is it optimal for a female to hold on to a few eggs? Let's say that during a normal mating with one frog on frog action, you'd have 90% of the eggs would be released. That means that the female takes a 5% hit, really, a 5% decline in fitness in order to simply not release all her eggs if she lives. Okay, maybe it's 80%. I actually don't know, and I don't really care that much, but it's less than perfect. So but if the female dies, 100% of the eggs are released. Now, first off, do frogs care for their young? Some do, some do not. These ones do not. So the males do not care for the young, the females do not care for the young. So her survival after mating does not actually increase the fitness of the offspring. Are these frogs annual, or are they going to live for many years? Well, if the average life expectancy of a frog is maybe 1.2 years, then there's probably not a great chance that they're going to be having multiple mating systems. So if they have a shorter lifespan, it could be beneficial to sacrifice oneself in one mating time. Well, still, why only release 80% of your eggs or 95% of your eggs? And the idea is, what kills a female frog? Well, many males trying to mate with a female at once will literally crush her. So if these many males manage to crush her, she dies and she releases all her eggs. So in this case, what happens is, if there are enough males present to kill, then there is enough sperm present that there's going to be a wide variety and genetic diversity of the offspring. And thus, under these conditions, the female frog gains more of an advantage by dying and releasing the eggs than she would if she released all her eggs with a single mating. It just comes to the question of, well, how is this better than? How is this a little more optimal than the comparison? And really, if she has more genetic diversity of her offspring, then she will have higher fitness in terms of grand tadpoles, because her tadpoles will have more tadpoles of their own. The babirusa is a type of pig where the tusks are actually going to grow through the upper lips and curve around. Now, these tusks are not useful for fighting. These tusks are not useful for defense. And these tusks can eventually pierce the skull and kill the pig. Now, they don't always pierce the skull. Sometimes they just grow around. Now, they're sites for infection, of course. They're a cause for irritation. But the idea is that the longer the tusk, the more chance that one of these four tusks is going to pierce an eye or a skull, or go back around and pierce the cheek, or cause other problems. So why is it that these tusks haven't evolved like another pig, where, say, the domestic hog just produces a few tusks that are perfectly fine for defense, perfectly fine for fighting, and also they don't kill the pig? So why is this not selected against? Well, when do they pierce the skull? Is it within 1 year? No, it's longer into the lifespan. Now, often they get broken. So the questions would be, how often is a pig going to die? How often is a babirusa going to die of skull-piercing teeth? And the answer is, well, not that often. So there's not sufficient natural selection to, say, destroy this. So there's not enough natural selection to stop it. But there is enough sexual selection that the longer those tusks are, the more chance the male is going to have more mates. So if a male is growing, two tusks that manage to curve back around and look really pretty, that male is going to have had mates from the time his tusks are the longest till the time his tusks come back and pierce him in the own eye. So as long as he's mating, though, he's getting higher and higher fitness. So to have a tusk long enough to pierce your own skull means that the entire time it's getting longer, that male has more fitness. And if it misses the skull, congratulations, you dodged for this turnaround, and you get to mate for even longer. So these mating displays, the bigger they get, the more risky they get, but you increase fitness with increased risk. So ultimately, sexual selection wins over natural selection because sexual selection here is a higher pressure than natural selection. Ultimately, these descend from other pigs, which can grow tusks as a sign of mating, or sign of dominance. So this is the ultimate for it. The adaptation there is obviously sexual selection, not natural selection. The development is that the tusks start growing at a certain stage in the pig's life and continue growing until death, sometimes causing it, and the mechanism is growth of tusk. Fig wasps. The female is going to enter a fig. She loses her wings, and she enters a fig's flower, syconium. And so she enters, she loses her wings, she lays her eggs, both male and female larvae hatch, and then the males mate with the females, and then the males die. And the females leave. So the males will chew a hole for the females, they'll mate with the females will mate, they'll get pollen on them, and they'll leave. Okay, so every single one of these little Targaryens is a male mating with his sister. That is so inbred. That is so incredibly inbred. It's only male and female of the same one. So how is something that inbred functional? Well, the males are haploid. And since the males are haploid, any male that has a defective gene expresses the defective gene and dies, or rather, an defective allele. It expresses it and dies. So that any male every generation, all defective alleles are cleansed. Yeah. So all the defective alleles leave. And that means that only the functional alleles are maintained. Now, the problem with inbreeding is the accumulation of defective alleles. But clearly that doesn't happen when all the defective alleles are cleansed in each generation. Yeah. It took me a few to really see how that works. Heterozygote advantage just doesn't work for the males. So yes, the descent there is some insects can be haploid, some insects can be diploid. They have that male-female haplodiploidy that we mentioned in a previous lecture. The adaptation here is the loss of defective alleles. The development here is, well, the males are male versus female and larvae versus adult here. And the mechanism here is just haplodiploidy, or haploidy. So cats, they mate, and it's like, well, how is this cat mating actually like a good thing? It sounds like they're not having fun. They're not. It sounds like there's a lot of fighting. Why would there be so much fighting going on? Why would there be so much yowling going on? Well, again, it's a mating call that the female cat is going to when she's in heat call all the males to the yard, and they're like, let's fight. The dominant male will be the one who mates with the female. Good. But she attacks him afterwards. So it's not like, it's not like the males all fight and then one male gets to have the female and then she's like, yeah, cool, just you and me. I got the best male. No, she'll fight him. She'll kick him off. She'll scratch at him and all that. She'll hate on him. And then other male cats will join in, fight him, and then mate with her. So the male cats are fighting for access. The female cats fight the other males so that they can have additional mates. And by having additional mates, the kindle of kittens, which is what a group of kittens is called, is they can have multiple fathers, which means a greater genetic diversity. So the males fight each other so that only the best males have access. The female fights the male so that she gets all of the best types of sperm. The mechanism there is that this triggering of fight behavior after mating as opposed to a cuddle behavior after mating. And also that the female is capable of being inseminated by multiple males and having her eggs fertilized by multiple males. That's the mechanism. The development of this is obviously at one stage of the cat's life are they going to do this, and the males will have this tendency to fight each other, a thicker ruff around the neck to take injuries, and the females will have a tendency to, fight males. The adaptation here is it is advantageous to have a diverse set of kittens. And the descent is I'm not actually too sure about how many other cat relatives do this, but I do know your case of, well, the only other cat we've talked about lately, lions, they have multiple males in a pride. So this is, these are weird systems. And to make them weirder, we've got gender bending. So we've already talked about penis fencing in flatworms. So go find another class where that sentence occurs. Anyway, garter snakes, they mate when they emerge from a hibernaculum. Now, it is advantageous for the males to all swarm around the female, and they will try to inseminate her by fighting and wrestling with each other. However, it is also advantageous for a male emerging from the hibernaculum a little too late to pretend to be a female and to secrete female pheromones. Why? Well, he gets piled on by a bunch of males. Isn't that awkward? Well, yes, but he'll get warmed up. And by being warmed up by all those males rubbing against him, he is more likely to be able to avoid predation and mate with other females. So pretending to be a pretending to be the sex you're not is advantageous to garter snakes. Probably shouldn't use the word gender here. My apologies. Nemo here. Finding Nemo is kind of a disturbing story when you realize the actual biology. The largest clownfish in a group of clownfish becomes female. If the clownfish is the largest, is the most dominant, it turns from male to female. Early in their life, they're male. So Nemo, male. Marlin, when Marlin's wife died, they didn't have wives anyway. When Marlin's mate died, Marlin would have become a female. So that would have been, he would have been the new mom, which is great for Nemo. His mom never died. His mom just passed and his dad became his mom. So hooray. But that's common among some fish, is the ability to start life as male and then just become female later on. There's a lot of interesting systems out there. And what's perhaps the most fascinating about this biology is how many different times you'll see, well, that doesn't make sense. But once you start looking at the right questions, and once we start asking it in terms of sexual selection and resource allocation, a surprisingly large number of different mating systems make perfect sense.